poems. So this video, I'm going to look at Randall Mann's Villanelle yard sale. So let's go to weekly session, week 5. Hopefully everyone's watched the paper 1 video. So we're going to look at a couple of villanelles and a couple of pantoums. We some previous videos focused on the sonnet, that form, the 14-line poem with the turn and volta and everything a sonnet could do. We read a number of sonnets. This video, we're going to look at the villanelle. So here's a link that describes the villanelle. The villanelle is a highly structured poem made up of 5 tercets followed by a quatrain with 2 repeating rhymes and 2 refrains. And the first and third lines of the opening tercet, so that's the 3-line stanza. A 3-line stanza is a tercet, are repeated alternately in the last lines of the succeeding stanzas. And here's the structure. And you'll see it when we read it, right? It follows a strict rhyme scheme throughout. Here's the history. Strange as it may seem, the villanelle did not start off as a fixed form. So here's some history about the villanelle. And again, I'm not going to read this in detail. It's up here. So anytime, though, a poem is dealing with a specific structure, particularly one with repetition, something, think about this. Whenever we repeat something, when we go over it in our mind over and over again, that means something is on our minds, right? It means something is occupying our thoughts. Something is stuck with us, that we're mulling something over. Here's Randall Mann's yard sale. And just look at the title, yard sale. What does the title evoke? Do any of you like yard sales? What's a yard sale? Let's read the poem. The early birds arrive before the sun. They park their cars upon the neighbor's grass. We sell grandmother's things off one by one. Even before my father and I are done labeling her furniture en masse, the early birds arrive before the sun. Her dishes are among the first things gone. Corral, that setting of the middle class. We sell grandmother's things off one by one. Knitting needles, buttons, yarn, a ton of safety pins. The things that they amass, those early birds, arrive before the sun. By 8 o'clock, the yard is overrun. We move her clothes, her single demi-tasse. We sell grandmother's things off one by one. Father, it's late. Remove the signs. First son, forget the unsold still lifes on her grass. Forget the early birds arrive before the sun to cart your mother's things off one by one. You see the villanelle. Here, this is stanza of 3 lines is a tercet. 3 tercet, right? Sun, 1. The early birds line repeats in the 3rd line. This 3rd line repeats here. Sun, 1, done, sun, gone, 1 ton, sun, overrun, 1, sun, 1. We see the 1st and 3rd line rhyme, and then the middle line, grass and rhymes throughout. So it's a tightly structured form with repetition. Let's look at the poem. The early birds. Who are these early birds? Think of the people arriving at the yard sale, right? Think of the people going to the yard sale. And what does a yard sale do usually? We sell off old things we don't want. A lot of times, things we don't need, useless items. In this instance, they're selling off the father's mother and the speaker's grandmother's things because she passed away, right? The early birds arrive before the sun. They're like early birds. They're almost like vultures, right? Here to gather up all the stuff. They park their cars up on the neighbor's grass. We sell grandmother's things off one by one. Even before my father and I are done. So they're still labeling the furniture. The early birds are there, ready to pick it over. Her dishes are among the first things gone. I'm fascinated. We have these things here, right? Corral. Those are those unbreakable dishes. I'm curious when we look at these things, and I'm curious about the speaker's tone. The speaker's tone is a little distant. It's like they're observing their father putting the mother's stuff out. And I'm fascinated with these things: the corral, the dishes, knitting needles, buttons, yarn, a ton of safety pins. Are we our things? I'm fascinated with that. What do we do with all of our stuff? We have all these things. What is it? Are we our things? I'm fascinated by that. By 8 o'clock, the yard is overrun. We move her clothes, her single demitasse. We sell grandmother's things off one by one. And I'm going to argue here in the first one, two, three, four, five, the first five stanzas, the tercets, there is a distance between the speaker and the grandmother, that they're just getting rid of grandmother's things. Uh, the final quatrain, though, these four lines, this final stanza, there's a big turn, I would argue. Father, it's late. We see a recognition here, right? What's going on here? Think of the previous poems we have read between parents and children, the relationships, the difficult relationships. Here, it's almost like the speaker of the poem, if we call him a son, they're recognizing that their father's mother died. Father, it's late. And that the father is grieving. Father, it's late. Like the father can't let the things go. These are his mom. And you can almost juxtapose this poem with some of the others we've read. The others are some heartbreakers. We can assume that a grandmother, that this woman perhaps lived a long, semi-happy life, right? However, even though this is a seemingly happy life, almost no one escapes the ordinary crises of death. The father is still sad. Father, it's late. And it's almost like the son, the speaker, recognizes this in the end here. Remove the signs. First son. Forget the unsold still life's honor grass. Forget the early birds arrive before the sun to cart your mother's things off one by one. And you see the final line, which is a repetition of this, but it switches from grandmother, where there's some distance there, to your mother. So there's this recognition that the father, even though they're getting rid of these things in the yard sale, he doesn't want to let go. What do we do with all these things? Right? What do we do with all of our loved ones' things? We can't keep everything. And it's really hitting the father here that it's over. And there's a recognition by the speaker. But you see the repetition of the poem is the repetition of the mindset, the early birds, the yard sale, all these things that are going on. And you can see the effect, the rhythmic effect of the rhyme, the villanelle, what it does. So that's a pretty quick reading of Randall Mann's Yard Sale. On the surface, the poem, it makes me think of all what do we do with all of our things? Are we our things? The next poem, Christian Wyman's What I Know, is a little more opaque and mysterious, but you get the gist of the form that I think is fascinating and really captures the moment, mood, and tone of the poem.